right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the June edition of our monthly Startup Resources Series webinar. We have a huge crowd today, which I am so pleased to see. You know, it is always our pleasure to curate and do a lot of research in order to bring you some excellent subject matter experts in a wide variety of startup resources so that we can present that information to you so that primarily you who are working with your startup founders, your startup clients, have the expertise at your fingertips, but you also have that go-to resource when you need to make those referrals on behalf of your startup clients. And we certainly thank you for the work that you do in coaching, guiding, and advising your startup founders. As well as the fact that you save them an immense amount of time, effort, expense with your curated knowledge. So we have a really great topic, one that we've not had before. So I'm excited for that in just a moment. I'm Lisa Bajornis. I am Executive Director of our Kentucky Innovation Hubs with KSTC. And of course, we are joined in partnership by our team over at the Cabinet for Economic Development that are heading up KY Innovation. Before I jump into our quick agenda, I've got some introductions I want to make. So we are really excited to welcome some new team members to our Innovation Hubs. I want to welcome Mitko Karshovsky. So he is the new operations manager with Blue North, and he's going to be heading up all of the activities in their soon to be opened Spark House, their new entrepreneur center up there in Covington in Northern Kentucky. So welcome, Mitko. And then over in our SOAR Innovation Hub, I want to welcome two new folks. We have Sabra Lowe, who is their new Startup Outreach Coordinator. I had the pleasure of getting to meet Sabra just last week when I participated as a speaker at their very recent Startup Appalachia Accelerator Founders Weekend. It was a great weekend in Ashland. And also just joining SOAR, we also want to welcome Colt Swint, who is their new Startup Pipeline Coordinator. So welcome to both Sabra and Colt with the SOAR Innovation team. All right, let's jump into it. For those of you that are series regulars, welcome back. And for those of you that are new to our series, welcome. And we hope you'll be able to join us every third Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern over Zoom webinar for another exciting resource. So today, normally we have a cabinet update that's given by David Brock, who is Executive Director for KY Innovation with the cabinet, but a lot of our team members over there with KY Innovation are up in Boston this week, participating and attending the BIO conference. So they are busy with that. And hopefully they are representing Kentucky well. I know they are. We will then very quickly move into today's topic. We are going to hear in our hub highlight portion an update from our Create Innovation Hub from the Bowling Green region. And then I've got a number of announcements I'll share with you. And that'll wrap it up. And we will be finished on or before 11 o'clock to make good use of your time. At any point during our presentations today, if you have questions you'd like to have asked, please just drop them in the chat. I'll facilitate the chat while we have our presenters speaking today. One thing I want to definitely mention to you or remind you of, if at any time you want to go back to a prior recording, we do have a library of all of our Startup Resources series recordings or webinars. You just go to the kstc.com site, click on the primary menu there under Our Initiatives. You'll click on Kentucky Innovation Hubs, just scroll down and you'll see the section there that has the monthly Startup Series webinars. So if there's any topic you want to go back to, re-listen, etc., get connected with, you are always welcome to go back to our library of those particular resources. So just want to make sure you're all aware that we do that for you. All right, let's jump right into it. So as I mentioned, this is a new topic, right? We've never thought about the fact that early stage companies, tech startups, tech enabled startups have human resources needs, right? We don't think about that necessarily. We think about there's a founder or co-founders, and then maybe there's, some contract folks that they may be able to, that they're working with. But when we often think about the fact that as a startup potentially raises capital, one of the very first things they do with that capital, of course, is then hire talent. And whether that's hiring part time, full time, contract, whatever the case may be, along with that, there's a good deal to know about how to manage that process well and for the benefit of the startup from a human resources standpoint. So, think about best practices with hiring contractors and deciding, is it a contractor or should it be an employee? Think about offer letters, salary benchmarks. Are there going to be stock options? Are there perks or benefits that will be packaged up in the compensation package that's offered? What you can and can't do in terms of interviewing. And especially now, we have so many of our team members that are working remotely, but that also has some human resource need to know type issues to be aware of and communication. And there's certainly a number of different human resource related software that may be very helpful or useful. So there's a lot to unpack here. And I'm going to stop sharing as I introduce Charlie Vance. Hi, good morning, Charlie.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear me?
We sure can. If you
All
want to
right.
go ahead and pull up anything you'd like to display, I'll just keep talking for a bit more. I had the very distinct pleasure to get to meet Charlie very recently, and he is both founder and CEO of Current HR. And we do see your presentation there. Thank you. And we just had an amazing conversation. I was very pleased to know that he's got a legal background as an attorney by degree, and he has now created Current HR and is really building up this particular practice. But importantly, I got into a great conversation with Charlie as he explained to me his strong desire to want to support more early stage companies, and there is so much for us to know as we coach these tech founders, and also as just in general, how to go about best practices in this regard. And it's not something we always think about, but certainly very necessary. And so, Charlie, we are really pleased to have you today, and I will let you take it away.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. I was telling Lisa last week, I'm getting over a cold, so we'll just get through this together here. If you have trouble hearing me, let me know. As Lisa said, I I'm on my second startup. I'm an entrepreneur myself, and I've been doing this for 15 years. I practiced law for a couple years, and then kind of went straight into starting a business. And I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs over the years and volunteered with entrepreneur networks and done a lot and seen a lot. So what we kind of decided was Lisa gave me a wish list of things she wanted to cover, and I'll try to cover them all. And I'm just going to give you kind of my perceptions of these things. I'm not going to get into specific details about, this law does this or things that you need to think about, but really more what to look for is kind of what I had in mind. But I also just want to say, like, I'm born in Kentucky. I've grew up in London Corbin area, lived in Richmond, went to college there. Now I live in the Blue North region. I'm very excited about that new building opening up and can't wait to get involved there. But I love what the Kentucky Innovation Hubs is doing, and I'm grateful that we've got this program. So I'm just going to jump straight into it. I think we can ask questions, please. It's lonely presenting on, on a webinar like this, so please drop questions in the chat. And I don't think I can see them, but hopefully somebody's monitoring that.
I'll take
All
care of
right.
that for you. No
All
worries.
right. Thank you. All right, let's jump straight in. Um, so I kind of put these in rank order of what I think is important. And the first thing to me is what I see a lot with small businesses, entrepreneurs getting started, is this concern about employee versus contractor versus intern. Mainly the issue is usually contractor. What I see a lot of is small business will say, "Hey, um, I only have contractors. I don't have employees." And so I probe a little bit and ask some questions and find out, you know, they're showing up to the office. You're giving them a laptop. Um, you're telling them when to come to work, how much work to do, how to do their work. Um, that smells a lot like employee, not just to me, but to the IRS and to the Department of Labor, more importantly. And I think that's something that you guys can keep a lookout for and just give people an idea that, look, it's not what sometimes people will say to me is, well, I have a contract with them, so they're a contractor. Well, the IRS has their own test for what a contractor is. It's a multi-factor test. Um, it's based on common law. There's about 20 factors or so. It's mostly dependent on what kind of control the employer has over the contractor. And this is important because if you classify someone as a contractor, then you're not paying all the employer side taxes on them, which is why the IRS cares about that. So there's risk there, genuine risk for the potential employer. And even if they've only got one, but I've definitely run into, small businesses, entrepreneurs that have 10 or 20, sometimes overseas. I just brought on a client that they told me they had 5 contractors coming on board, and I was like, okay, we can take care of that for you. And then I gathered all their census information, and we get ready to implement them. And I found out they had a contractor in Brazil, in South Africa, and Brussels, and they weren't doing some of the things that you have to do, even if you're a contractor in those states. So we outsourced that to a global payroll provider, but they hadn't been doing those things. So these are things to watch out for, and really, I mean, you need legal advice when it comes to global payroll. Um, I also do see some interns or people attempting to hire interns and not pay them. I think as a general rule of thumb, just pay the interns. Um, there is an exception to have unpaid interns. Obviously, we've heard of those scenarios, but it's difficult to meet that test, in my opinion. And usually, small businesses are not able to do it. It has to be for the benefit of the intern. If the intern is working for the company for the company's benefit, then you got to pay them. They're an employee. You can classify them as you should have some policies in place to classify them so they may or may not get benefits or may not have all the rights, PTO and whatnot, that general employees would have. Um, but for the most part, paying them is an important thing. The other thing to know about these contractor rules is they change with new administrations. So we got a new rule in place now under the Trump administration. So these things evolve and change, and it's not always clear cut and easy to make a determination. Okay. As I mentioned, there's penalties for doing it wrong. So I just listed some here. The big thing is back taxes. If you misclassify someone as a contractor and the IRS says, hey, they should have been an employee, then you have to pay potential back taxes plus fines to the IRS, interest on all that amount. And if you've got 10 or 12 contractors and you've been doing it for 3 years, and this number could add up for a small business. So I do think it's important. Um, there's also potential penalties, like if you had them as a contractor, you probably didn't get an I-9 for them. You probably didn't get the proper documentation for them. They should have been an employee. There's potential penalties there. You probably weren't paying them overtime. So there's potential violations there from the DOL side. So really just what I want to impress on you is genuine risk here for not classifying employees properly. Just as an FYI, at the end of my presentation, I have my slide deck and some other resources for you, all in a downloadable link with a QR code here. So I'll give that to you at the end. All right. The other thing I see commonly, exempt versus non-exempt. So what I see super commonly is small businesses classifying employees as quote unquote salaried. And just like with contractor employee rules, there's a test. They have to meet certain specific duties tests. We call these sometimes the white collar exemptions. It's been in the news recently because the Biden administration attempted to increase the minimum salary level. That was overturned by a court right before the Trump administration took over. Trump administration's not going to continue that appeal. But that's another thing is these rules change. So we're going to have a different administration at some point, and they're likely to look at this because the minimum salary is it's 40 some $1,000s. It's pretty low. A lot of people think it should be higher, and they want to tie it to some type of inflation CPI test so that it continues to go up as inflation goes up. But the important thing to know is that this is also not straightforward. Me and other attorneys are often debating, where does this fall? What is the risk? What's the employee actually doing versus what their job description says? A job description is not it's not a silver bullet here. I hear that a lot from employers. It's what they're actually doing, and do they meet the test? So the tests are administrative, executive, outside sales. There's 5 or 6 of them, but just know that there's specific duties that they have to meet. You got to pay them on a salary basis. And if you don't do that, if you're paying them on a salary, then you're not paying them overtime, and that's the risk. Because we had a pretty high profile one here in our region within the last couple of years where a group was highly compensated employees were paying them quite a bit, but they didn't meet the duties test. And a court found that for the last 6 or 7 years, companies not been paying them appropriately, and they got to go back and pay everybody overtime. And so genuine risk here. This is kind of a more in-depth version, just how to meet the test, a list of some of the duties tests that need to be met, and salary basis is another thing that people I think avoid talking about or don't consider. So you got to meet the 3: duties test, salary basis test, and pay them a minimum of $684 a week. Salary basis test, it just means that they get paid a predetermined fixed amount, and you don't deduct from that amount. So if someone doesn't work half a day on Friday, they still get paid if they're salaried. We see this trap too sometimes. It can even get more complicated than that. For example, our 6th Circuit, which controls Kentucky, had a case recently where an employer, they were paying an employee the minimum salary basis, and they said, hey, if you work more than X number of hours, we'll pay you $100 an hour for everything you work more in that week. And that was going above and beyond the salary basis test. The person met the duties test. There was no argument about that. They met the minimum salary test. Court found that they didn't meet the salary basis test because they weren't paying them a standard, predetermined, fixed amount, even though they're paying more. So this is complicated stuff, and I live in it every day. So, I think that I just don't want to see entrepreneurs get caught up in a trap where they put themselves in a liability position, really, is what it's about. So just main point here is it's complicated. And again, penalties here. I've listed all the penalties. An important thing to know is for willful violations, it could be potentially criminal. I don't even think I've ever heard of a case like that, but I don't want to leave it in a prosecutor's hands for that. Usually that's meant for employers who are abusing um, employees and not paying them overtime. But there could be potential criminal element to this. But DOL fines are up to $1,000 per violation. How they define violation is critical here. Is that every time you pay them potentially? Is it per employee? Um, and I think sometimes that's left up to the Department of Labor or the courts. Um, Back wages, liquidated damages, there. Um, you may potentially have to pay the attorney's fees if this gets brought into a civil matter into the courts. I could go on and on. The fees can rack up.
Yeah.
That's the main issue here. Did you have a question, Lisa?
Charlie, we do have a question that now might be appropriate for it. It was asked, how is the professional duties test defined?
Oh Lord, I don't have it in front of me. I'm sorry. They're all different. And I don't have it memorized. I apologize. But the professional one it's the administrative one that people get in trouble with. I'll say that. Professional and executive, I think, are easier to meet. The question is often about management experience. Are they managing people? Are they making independent decisions? And I don't remember which one that falls under, but usually people are trying to squeeze them into the administrative position or duties test. So apologies, I don't have it in front of me, but I can circle back with a
Okay,
sheet or
perfect.
something.
And then also just quickly, the information provided, the question is, does this apply to solopreneurs? So single founder entities that have an LLC?
I mean, if you're the solopreneur, you're essentially the owner, CEO of the company. So that is your qualifying, meets the
Mm-hmm.
qualifying duties test. So no, you're not going to sue yourself.
Right.
So yeah, pay your
Okay,
taxes, you know.
great.
Alrighty.
Thanks.
Okay, workers' comp. This is another thing I see pretty regularly. Um, and I just want to impress upon you why this is important and relevant. Your entrepreneurs, they should get workers' comp insurance in place before they hire their first employee. First of all, it's required by statute in the state of Kentucky. It's required, and in most states. Um, the reason it's so important is because in Kentucky and other states, we have this legal principle called exclusive remedy. And essentially, it'd be hard to do business without exclusive remedy because what we decided a long time ago was that we're going to cover all work related injuries under an insurance program. And that's the employee's only recourse for if they get injured at a job. If you don't have workers' comp insurance in place, then you are not availed of the exclusive remedy protections. And so this could be costly if, say, and usually you think of startups that maybe they're like software developers or something like that, and you think, well, they don't have a lot of risk. Well, driving a car for the job is a lot of risk. Um, and people can get injured and get terribly injured, of course. And if they're driving for the company, then that's a work-related injury. So I do think it's critical, but what I usually see is that employers, somebody will have advised them, an accountant or something, to go ahead and get workers' comp insurance. What happens is the next year comes up at renewal, they miss the email, they don't renew or pay the next year, and coverage lapses. And sometimes workers' comp carriers they will drop you for whatever reason. Sometimes it's not your fault. You didn't even have any claims. They just decide they're not going to be in this market, this geography, and so you got to go out and find a new carrier. So it's critical to have an insurance broker in place who will be on top of that with you. But losing the exclusive remedy protection is a big deal, and that's what I want to impress upon everyone. All right. HR software for startups. So I just wanted to list, again, I'm going to give you these slides. I just wanted to list like some features that I think are important if if the entrepreneur wants to say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take it on. I only need, 2 employees. I can just use the software to manage this. Um, I would recommend that you probably combine this with a payroll service. I like Gusto and Bamboo. I haven't worked with them directly, but we take a lot of clients that come from other places. And when we take clients from, other software, we kind of get a sense of who likes what, who doesn't like what. Usually people have good things to say about Gusto and Bamboo HR. That's why I mentioned them, but I don't have any specific experience. What I hear a lot though is that they're not providing HR assistance, no compliance assistance. It's really just this is a software to use. It's good software, but it's up to you to manage it. The other thing is you want to make sure that they have a records management. If you're looking at software programs, I kind of put in red over here the thing that they got to have. We want to make sure they've got a records management system where that you can keep their records, their application, all the things that you might be collecting outside of the system, you can put in there, and then they're collecting some things maybe through an onboarding system. They probably need an onboarding system, and specifically I-9 tools. I-9s are an area that are fraught with errors. We see it all the time. Big companies, small companies, law firms that they've got I-9s that just aren't filled out correctly. And this is the current concern for us right now. And I'll get into that. But I would advise that if you're thinking about considering HR software, think about what it is that you need, payroll, benefits, compliance, whatever it is, and then match that up with the software that you're looking at, and focus on ease of use and how you can scale it. Is this going to be good long-term fit? Am I trying to go to 50 employees? Is this going to make sense then? Am I going to have to switch? Switching payroll providers is it's pain. It's pain. So you want to make sure that you can be with it for a minute. Outsourcing HR functions generally, so not just the software, but this is outsourcing the HR management as well. In my opinion, if you've got a small business that's starting up and they're going to hire employees, I think it makes sense to consider it. It's not cheap, um, but the big thing about outsourcing some of these pieces, just like with accounting or payroll or other pieces of your business that you would, I think, summarily outsource without much thought, just because it's a required part of doing business. To me, HR falls into this category because there's just a lot of areas of compliance issues and concerns to be worried about, and you want to take it off your plate. What do you want to do if you're an entrepreneur? You want to focus on growth, and so that's why I think it probably makes sense to outsource it. At the very least, payroll. If you're going to add benefits, you're going to need help there implementing it, onboarding employees, explaining what the benefits are to employees and new hires. If you're going to pay for benefits, you want to make sure that employees understand it, take advantage of it, because that's why you're doing it, to recruit employees, and make sure that you've got a good package set that makes sense for recruiting for your specific business. 401k, I mean, there's just a lot of areas where that can be challenging from a compliance perspective. With 401k, you have to outsource it, essentially. One option for small businesses is not just outsourcing the service of it, but outsourcing employment. So You may have heard of PEOs. That's what my company is. It's not a sales pitch. I just think generally um, PEOs become a co-employer with the employees. What this does is take a little bit of the liability off the plate of the small business, and PEOs become responsible for all of these compliance aspects. So that takes a lot of the weight off of the plate of the CEO, founder, entrepreneur. Um, and it also comes with a lot of PEOs, like my PEO, provide the benefits, provide the workers' comp, provide the HRS and payroll. Um, and sometimes it can be much cheaper on workers' comp and benefits. Not every time, but sometimes it can be. There can be money savings there because PEOs are going to the market with their entire group of co-employees and buying workers' comp and benefits on a larger scale, so better bargaining power. This is an option I think is often overlooked by small businesses, and PEOs won't necessarily take all small. Some of them have a floor, 5 or 10 employees they won't take, so you might have to shop around. But yeah, again, focus on bandwidth there and scalability. Okay, I was mentioning earlier about I-9s and the importance of it. They're challenging to fill out correctly. So every employee has to have an I-9. This is the document that certifies that they're able to work in the United States. I put this chart up here because if you remember back in 2018, that was the first Trump presidency, and I-9 audits went up pretty dramatically during that time. And they would have continued going up had it not been for COVID. So we had a reprieve there in the latter part of the Trump presidency, the first go round. But I anticipate that we're going to see this spike again. Obviously, there's been a lot on the news and whatnot about ICE raids and whatnot. But there's an audit that you can get from ICE, which is just, hey, it's a knock on the door, give us all of your I-9s, and you may have an opportunity to correct some in that scenario. The other scenario is a raid where ICE comes in and says, all right, everybody out. And now we're going to go through your things and question employees. That's the more nefarious scenario, I would say. I that's kind of left for, we hope it's left for where there's genuine suspect that the employer may be employing multiple folks who are not eligible to work in the United States. But we expect both to go up is the bottom line there. And again, there's penalties for not doing it correct. We have a new I-9 penalty schedule that just went up. These continue to go up, kind of along with inflation, but it doesn't look like a big number at 288 for a substantive form I-9 violation, but they add up. They add up over time, and you can get fined for what I call foot faults, which are, we hired someone who's legal to work in the United States. We collected their documents. We reviewed them. They are eligible to work in the United States, but we put the driver's license number in the wrong category, and we didn't sign it within 3 days of them being employed. And the signing within 3 days of being an employee, of being employed and verifying their documents, that can be a substantive violation because it's not correctable. So some of the things, like you put it in the wrong box, check the wrong box, employee writes down the wrong birthday, you can go back and correct that and put a memo with the file, and ICE will usually overlook that. But if you don't do it timely, it can't be corrected moving forward and could be a finable offense. So this is why it's important to have help. I have a self-audit guide down at the bottom of the screen there that's a link to that, so you can go to that and take a look at how to audit your I-9s that you already have. Okay, and then there's potential criminal penalties with this as well. Again, it's just something for people to be aware of. Like, this is for willfully concealing and harboring. Um, but we've had some local ones here recently that have had criminal penalties. So it's just something to know about, is that you don't want to leave this up to a ICE investigator or prosecutor. We want to try to do it correctly.
Right. So question has come in, are electronic signatures on I-9s via payroll software sufficient?
Electronic signatures are fine. It's the verifying of the documents, the employment documents, that are a challenge. If you use E-Verify, then you can um, electronically view and verify the documentation. E-Verify is a whole different thing. If you don't use E-Verify, then you have to do it in person, which is really what throws people in a wrench. I mean, a lot of employers, small businesses, entrepreneurs, they want to hire people remotely now, and that can be a challenge, and that's why you need help. Make sense? All right. Well, on the topic of multi-state, post-COVID, we've just seen a lot. I started my new business in the middle of COVID. My prior business, I was in maybe 15 states. Right out of the gate, with my new business, I'm in 40 states, including states I don't necessarily want to be in, like California and New York and New Jersey. And the main reason is because a lot of the clients that I work with, they have remote employees there. And so I've got to be registered there, and we've got to make sure that they're in compliance. And what I've put here is just a list of all the different laws that you see in different states. We've got different minimum wage and overtime. We've got, I mean, paid sick and family leave is a big one. We're seeing a lot. I anticipate we'll see more states pass paid family leave rules, which you have to comply with. Um, Different states have different protected classes. We in Kentucky, we have a protected class for smokers. And so a lot of people coming into Kentucky don't understand that. They can't discriminate against smoking status. But in other states, we also have a special protection for pregnant workers as well. We passed that a few years ago. But in other states, hairstyle, height and weight, marital status, political affiliation. Seattle just passed one for caste system, domestic violence victim status. These are just things you need to be aware of, if you're going into another state. The other thing that I've seen recently is required trainings, specifically sexual harassment. Illinois, New Jersey, there's some other ones out there. If you've got one employee, you have to give them a sexual harassment training, and there's certain standards that have to be met. So essentially, if you're going to hire someone, you've got to outsource it. It's just, I mean, it's not really feasible for a small business to hire someone and then give them a training and be competent at it and be sure that you're going to meet the standard. So I'd say just be careful with multi-state hiring, particularly if you're going to go into the Northeast or out west. Doing business in California is like doing business in another country. I'm sure you guys have heard that before, but I'm just telling you. Here's an example. Recently, one passed. If you hire an employee where there's been a state of an emergency declaration, you have to give them notice at the time of hire that in their region that there was a state of emergency declared for a forest fire or whatever the emergency was. And then obviously in California, there's been a bunch of that stuff happening. And so as far as I know, there's no exception to a remote worker who's living in their home where you don't live and know anything about the region. but still the notice is required, as far as I know. So just an example, be leery of, I'd say be leery of California, New York, Jersey, Illinois, Colorado, and kind of down a little bit further down the list, Michigan, Minnesota, um, anything, Massachusetts, anything in the Northeast, really. Be leery. Just ban the box laws. I won't go through these. Meal and rest time breaks. That's another big one. Um, and then final paychecks. There's some states where you terminate an employee, you've got to give them everything they're owed before they leave that day, which creates it's a big challenge for payroll providers. So you have to be prepared and know that that's required, and that can result in immediate fines and penalties. Essentially, you got to outsource this. Is the long and short of it. Um, it Here's the key thing to remember: it doesn't matter where the employer's office is located. It only matters where the employee is located. And I hear this a lot. Well, I'm in Kentucky, so Kentucky rules apply. That's not how it works. You're hiring someone in Colorado, you're reaching out to that state, you've got to comply with Colorado law. Okay. Good on questions? Okay.
Yep, we're good on questions, and you have about 2 minutes left.
Oh goodness. Well, I'm clearly not going to make it to the slides, but again, I'm going to give you everything, all the stuff. Apologies for being a little long-winded. Interviewing do's and don'ts. What I'm concerned about here is employees asking illegal or entrepreneurs asking illegal questions. I've put a document in here of things not to ask. This is critical. I see a lot of young entrepreneurs and they just don't know. They just don't know. And they'll ask, what church did you go to? When did you graduate from college? And this is not substantive harassment in and of itself. It's just not helpful. And so you ask a lot of those questions, get yourself in trouble. Be careful. Review with an attorney or this document before you make hiring decisions or interviews. I did want to get to this slide. Managing remote teams. The thing I want to stress here is make sure that the company defines what a remote worker is. What does hybrid work mean? What are our expectations of a remote worker? There's been a lot of discussion about remote workers slacking off or going to the grocery store when they're supposed to be at home working. And so there's been a big push to use monitoring software. And I'll just caution that just be careful. Talk to an attorney. It can violate privacy rules if we're overly indulgent on the monitoring software. The other thing is balance this because employees don't like it. Employees hate being monitored like that. So what kind of culture are you trying to create? Do you want to create a culture of trust and transparency? And I get it. You got workers slacking off. But there's a balance there. And make sure that you set structured engagements with the remote workers. Set clear. This is all about communication. That's what gets you in trouble. Okay. One more thing. I have a sample offer letter. The only thing I'll stress about this is just make sure that in your offer letter you include an at-will statement and that this is not a contract. That's in the offer letter template that I've provided. I know I'm running them up on time. Again, apologies, Lisa. Maybe if you liked this, I can come back and finish it. I had a feeling we wouldn't make it through it. But this is a link to all the resources that I have, plus this slide deck. So there's more in there. Happy to come back and give the rest of it. Yeah, I hope that this was helpful.
Well, just as much as you got through, I know for all of us, this was just highly enlightening and just to understand the risk. And certainly thank you for all of your suggestions in our startup clients being able to mitigate that risk. And certainly the compelling message for if there's going to be, a hiring plan in place, consider outsourcing that to a PEO. And there's just a lot to consider. And certainly expert advice and counsel is warranted. So, Charlie, thank you so much for the information you've shared. And we will certainly share your presentation with all of our attendees. And for our attendees, we will share this to a follow-up email that we send you. We post it to our Slack, and the recording will be available, and of course, in our startup series webinar library, if you will, over on the ksdc.com site. Lots of comments, very helpful, great webinar. Let's see what else came along here. Yeah, this was very, very, very helpful. Lots of great information that was shared, much content. And I will take you up on having you back to go through some more for sure, because we do want to be aware of what we don't know. So
Oh,
thank you
happy to
so
do it.
much, Charlie. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
very good. If you'll stop share, and
Okay.
then we will move right on over. We do have a hub highlight. And so we are very pleased to have with us Buddy Steen, who is the program director with Create. And of course, Create is the innovation hub that's located down in the southern part of the state in Bowling Green, and they serve a 12-county region there. And Buddy is coming up here. Fun fact, Buddy's real first name is Henry.
Yes, it is. Thank you,
Awesome. All
Lisa.
right,
Let me
Buddy, if you
share my.
want to go ahead and share your screen.
Yeah,
And I
got
know
it.
you're going to share with us today the latest and greatest that's happening in the
Yes, ma'am.
Create 12 county region there. Great. We can see your slide.
Okay, can you
If
see
you
it?
want to, if you want to move that to full screen.
Oh, it is the full screen.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay. Okay, good. And so, yeah, thanks, Lisa. So,
Yeah.
we created Create to be the Central Region ecosystem for arts, technology, and entrepreneurship. And I know that's a long acronym, but we mean all of that. The culture, the art side. By the way, art and tech doesn't really, it's hard to separate that nowadays. And we teach, we coach, we support, we connect, and we do that every day, and we do it naturally. And fortunately, Bowling Green is a very collaborative environment, and so it's very natural for us to do it. I'm gonna give you an example of maybe teaching and coaching. One of the things that we do is we sit down and we work through valuations. This is a net present value discounted future cash flows. I've used it for years and years and years. The investors typically want 30 times their money back, right? But we put 10 in here, okay, times their money, and this is a 7-year run. These are fictitious numbers, but the thing that makes this one different than just like net present value is this probability of success factors. That's a very subjective analysis, okay, of their business model. And if their business model is in play, people are buying their product, they've got an MVP, Lisa, or something like that, then this goes up, right? If they don't, and they don't know if somebody will pay them, then we balance that. The financing, it really depends on a lot of things, right? But this is, can they get funding, right? Will they make it, right, to year 7, or will they just make it to year 1? Execution, a lot to do with their management team. When these companies are brand new, it's all about the team, and the investors will almost give you the tech, but the risks are associated with the group that's in it. The market risk is always very, very important. These numbers are extremely high. I've recently used this actually just last week, and on a very good company, but the technology risk here, normally these numbers do not go over 60%. In fact, they'll drop back to 30%. And we also have I have a spreadsheet. It's a lengthy analysis basically of the business model, and it goes in and it asks questions of every single part of what your company is doing, including who's your management team, and we score it and rate it sometimes, and that helps us fill this out, helps me fill this out, and it will calculate the pre-money valuation. It'll calculate, you punch in your cash flows basically, or what's the cash flow at the end of the year, right? And then you punch in the amount that you're raising right there, and then you put in your risk numbers, and it will calculate how much of the company you're going to be selling for $250,000, basically. And that's an MBA method. It's been used, if you go to get a Harvard MBA, they'll teach you this stuff. And I've used it with very, very small companies, and I've used it with big companies when we're doing deals with Corning and stuff. Okay, so a couple new programs. At least I'm trying to stay within my time, I'm for sure. A couple new programs coming up July 1st. We're going to bring back Bucks for Bright Ideas. This worked for us excellent. It helped us build a funnel throughout our entire region. If anybody came up with the tech idea, because of that Bucks for Bright Ideas being in all of our counties, and it's basically an inventor program. You're an invention, we're going to put you in a contest, but it gets the word out and people get excited. They love to talk about inventions. Inventors love to talk about us. And so this is a marketing program that does great things. And we do get some innovations out of it too. And something else we're creating is we're going to create ambassadors. We already have community champions. We've been around for 20 something years, but we never formalized that. And that's kind of on us. And we started realizing, wait a second, if somebody's an ambassador, they're titled. Now you have to do some things. You have to, there's code of conduct and there's some things you have to do to make that real, but it's worth it, right? And we want to increase our founders, investor, stakeholder engagement throughout the region. And so we expect that to work to help us. Okay, I'll let you know. I want to talk about a company. This is a group called the Fan Stand, and you'll see these companies that come through here that completely different colors and types and shapes. These guys invented basically it's a vending machine for fan merchandise. That's the way to put it. Okay. And they sell that thing all over. Okay. It's beautiful. I saw their last machine. It's huge. They had it out in the common area of our facility. We're at the Innovation Campus at WKU. And so the company's 4 years old. It's growing. They're hiring people, and if you're interested in that sort of stuff, you can find them at thefanstand.com. These, I just wanted to mention the governor came and saw us June 6th, and he walked all over the place in our common area and met several entrepreneurs. I mean, they just kept talking to him. He got really interested. They were telling their stories, Lisa, about their, startups and how the value and, and things like that. And so I agree with you, Charlie, when you talked about the Blue North facility. There's something to be said for being able to have a facility like that. But I do want to say, and we have a 285,000 square foot facility with lots of companies, but our mission is to really to go out into the region, right? And so when we talk about our facility, it's great, but we get out there, we want to be getting out there in all of our 12 counties. And so we're really going to focus on that. That's kind of our 2.0. Create 1.0, we started in 2003. We have our very first tenant, now has 1,000 employees in the region. He started with one. He was a subject matter expert like you, Charlie. He was a subject matter expert in logistics and technology, and that's what we want. We want these companies growing up and out and creating great jobs all over. So Create 2.0, we're starting that July 1. There's still several pieces that we're working out and figuring out, but we're kind of reinventing ourselves, and we are going to fill our talent repatriation database. We're going to do that. Okay. And that's going to really help us. Talent's the key. You've heard me say it a million times. Talent's the key to raising money. There's a lot of money out there, especially in our ecosystem. We've got a lot of that. What we need are more Jeremy Jacobs with the Undesk companies. We need that. We're going to recruit, we're going to grow, we're going to retain scalable companies. We don't lose companies to Nashville anymore, because Bowling Green really is a place to be. We're great place to live. Bottom line, we want to create wealth, opportunities, jobs for talented people. That's what we do. We're not the folks filling the Transpark. We're not the folks, recruiting manufacturing. We're the folks helping startups in the region. So Lisa, I think that's probably all the time I've got. Thank you for the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, buddy. Thanks for giving us a good update on what's happening down in Create in the Bowling Green region. And I will close just by a couple of announcements that I have for you. So this is what's happening around the state from our various innovation hubs. Of course, every Wednesday at 8 a.m. Central Time in Paducah, Sprocket has their coffee hour for their entrepreneurs to meet and collaborate together. Up north, Startup Cincy is hosting their Welcome to the Ecosystem. So that's Wednesday, June 18th, and that is sponsored by Blue North. Create is going to be having their next Startup Garden, which is a nice fireside chat with an entrepreneur, Wednesday, June 25th. That's at 4:30 Central Time at the Create offices. And as always, the last Wednesday there in June, Wednesday, June 25th, Awesome Inc. will be hosting another 5 Across pitch competition, 5 p.m. Eastern at the Lyric Theater. Moving over into July, Amplify has their monthly venture connectors, but this time rather than a luncheon meeting, they will be hosting pickleball tournament. That's going to be Wednesday, July 7th at Good Bounce, so come out for that if you're a pickleball enthusiast. We will meet here again for next month's Startup Resources series on the 15th of July, 10 a.m. That's virtual. And then if you want to hear from all 6 of our hubs and a full year's worth recap of their work against their goals and their initiatives for their regions, we have our quarterly Innovation Hub update. That's planned for Wednesday, July 30th, 10 a.m. That is also via webinar. So we look forward to seeing you at one of the Innovation Hub events or any other events in your regions sponsored by various different entrepreneur support organizations, or we'll see you right back here next month. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.